Every time you say it's fine when it isn't, you're obeying a rule a frightened child made decades ago. You apologized today for something that wasn't your fault. It slipped out, that automatic, "it's totally fine," when it really wasn't. You nodded along, smiling, while a quiet no sat trapped in your chest. You read the room and shrank yourself before anyone asked. And here's what no one ever told you. That reflex to keep everyone comfortable isn't your personality. It's a childhood wound, smiling. You didn't choose to become a people pleaser. Something taught you that being good was the price of being safe, long before you could remember. If even one of those moments felt like it was filmed inside your own life, go ahead and subscribe. What we're about to name has been quietly running yours for far longer than you've noticed. Today, we're going back to find that beginning, not to blame anyone, but to finally understand the small, frightened logic hiding underneath your kindness. Because what looks like a flaw in you was once the smartest thing a frightened child could possibly do. The childhood wound that made you a people pleaser. Let's start with something you do without thinking. Someone bumps into you, and you're the one who says sorry. A friend cancels plans, and you reassure them it's fine, even when your evening just collapsed. You feel a flash of anger, and within a second you've already smoothed your own face over. This is chronic niceness, the kind that runs on autopilot. It feels like manners. It feels like you. But notice how fast it happens, almost like a reflex you never agreed to. Here's the strange part. You're not actually choosing to be agreeable in these moments. There's no decision happening. The yes leaves your mouth before your real opinion finishes forming. The apology arrives before you've checked whether you did anything wrong. People call this being kind, being easygoing, being low maintenance. And you've worn those labels proudly, because they're the nicest things anyone says about you. But underneath that smooth surface, something is bracing. Something is scanning. Something is making sure, constantly, that nobody around you becomes upset. But this didn't start with you. To understand it, we have to go back to a house you might not picture clearly anymore. Picture a child, small, standing very still in a hallway. There's a sound coming from another room, a raised voice, a slammed cabinet, a silence that's somehow louder than shouting. And this child does something remarkable. They read the air. They learn, faster than any adult would believe, that their job is to make the big people feel okay again. That child was you. And what you were doing had a name therapists use now, the Fawn response. When a young nervous system senses danger it can't fight and can't flee from, it finds a third door, please. Soothe. Disappear into helpfulness. Make yourself so pleasant, so useful, so attuned to everyone else's mood, that the threat softens. It's not weakness. It's genius, honestly, a tiny survival strategy invented by someone too small to leave. The problem is what happens when that someone grows up. Because the danger eventually passes, the house gets quieter, or you move out, or the people who frightened you grow old and gentle. But the strategy doesn't get the memo. That Fawn response, built for one specific emergency, just keeps running. At work, in friendships, in love, at the grocery store. You're a grown adult apologizing to a chair you walked into. You're saying yes too much to people who'd happily hear a no. The wiring outlived the war it was built for. Look closer at what this cost you day to day. There's the hypervigilance, that exhausting radar always sweeping the room, checking faces, measuring tones. You walk into a gathering, and within seconds you've assessed who's tense, who's drifting, who might need managing. You think everyone does this. They don't. Most people simply walk in. You arrive already working a second job nobody's paying you for. Emotional security guard for every room you enter. And the shift, somehow, never quite ends, does it? Then there's the silent guilt, that low hum that follows you for having needs at all. You feel it when you take the last slice, when you ask for help, when you simply take up space in a conversation. Somewhere along the line you absorbed a quiet rule. Your needs are an inconvenience to be minimized. So you over-apologize. You thank people excessively. You ask permission to feel things. And underneath all of it sits a belief so old you mistake it for truth. That belief is this: love must be earned. And to find where it was planted, go back again, to a smaller version of you holding up a drawing, or a report card, or a cleaned room. Watch their face as they wait. Notice how the warmth only arrives after the achievement, after the good behavior, after being easy. A child learns the math quickly. I am lovable when I am useful. I am safe when I am pleasing. This is approval seeking, and it was taught. Now here's where it gets quietly tragic. To keep being the easy one, the good one, the pleasing one, you had to put something down. Your own preferences, your own anger, your own no. This is self-abandonment, and it's the hidden engine of people-pleasing. Every time you swallow what you actually want to keep someone else comfortable, you make a tiny trade, them over you again. You've made that trade so many thousands of times that you can barely hear your own voice anymore. And the cruelest twist, it rarely even works the way you hoped. You bend and bend, certain that enough niceness will finally buy you the steady love, the approval, the safety you're after. But the people who benefit from your bending rarely notice the cost. They just learn you're reliable. Meanwhile, you're left with that strange ache of never feeling enough, no matter how much you give. You're pouring from a cup with a crack in the bottom, and we haven't yet found the crack. Let's name that crack honestly. Underneath all the kindness lies a fear of conflict so deep it bends your whole body away from tension. The moment a conversation heats up, your stomach drops, your thoughts scatter, and a single command lights up your nervous system. Make this stop. So you concede. You change the subject. You agree with a point you don't believe just to dissolve the static in the air. To you, conflict doesn't feel like disagreement. It feels like the flaw disappearing. And there's a reason that feeling runs so deep. Go back once more to a younger you who watched what conflict did in your home. Maybe a raised voice meant days of cold silence afterward. Maybe disagreement got someone shamed, dismissed, or shut out entirely. Maybe the air just turned to ice and nobody explained why. A child in that house draws one conclusion: conflict is dangerous, and my job is to prevent it at any cost. That's not cowardice you carry now. That's an old alarm system, installed early, still firing at the smallest spark of tension. It was protecting something precious. What it was protecting was connection itself. For a small child, an angry or withdrawn parent isn't just unpleasant. It's a genuine threat to survival, because that child depends on them completely. This is the heart of attachment trauma. When the people you needed most were also the source of your fear, your system had to solve an impossible puzzle. Stay close to them, but stay safe from them. The solution: become whatever keeps them calm. Become an expert in their moods. Become, essentially, invisible in your own needs. The psychologist John Bowlby spent decades studying this bond between children and caregivers, and what he found reshaped everything. His attachment theory showed that we're wired from birth to stay connected to whoever cares for us, and when that connection feels unreliable or frightening, a child will contort themselves in remarkable ways to preserve it. They'll blame themselves rather than face the terrifying truth that the adult isn't safe. Because believing I'm the problem feels survivable. Believing the people I depend on can't be trusted does not. Sit with that for a second, because it rewrites your whole story. As a child, it was actually safer to believe you were the problem. If the trouble was you, your too muchness, your needs, your feelings, then you had control. You could fix yourself. You could be better, quieter, more pleasing, and maybe then the love would stabilize. So you took the blame that was never yours to carry, and that silent guilt you still feel today, that reflex to apologize for existing. It's the residue of a deal you made before you could even spell your own name. There was a person, grown now, successful by every outward measure, who came to understand this slowly. For years they were the one everyone called dependable, the one who never made waves, the friend who always understood. And they were quietly exhausted in a way they couldn't explain. They kept saying yes until their own life had no room left in it. It took them a long time to ask the question that changes everything. Not why am I like this, but what was I so afraid would happen if I stopped? When they finally traced it back, the answer floored them. As a kid, they'd been the peacemaker between two parents who fought constantly. Their pleasing wasn't a personality trait, It was a job they'd been handed at 6 years old. Keeping everyone calm had literally been their role in the family's survival. And no one ever told them the job had ended. They just kept showing up for a shift that closed decades ago, wondering why they felt so tired, why rest felt like something they hadn't earned yet. You might recognize that tiredness. It's the fatigue of self-abandonment, of running everyone else's emotional weather while your own forecast goes unchecked. Here's something concrete you can try today. The next time you feel that automatic yes rising, pause for one breath before it leaves your mouth. Just one. In that small gap, ask yourself a single question. Is this a yes or is this fear? You don't even have to act differently yet. You just have to start noticing the difference between them, because for years there's been no difference at all. That noticing is the first thread of nervous system regulation, teaching your body that not every tension is an emergency. Because right now, your system treats a co-worker's frown and a genuine threat as the same red alert. The Fawn response doesn't distinguish between someone being mildly annoyed and someone being dangerous. It just floods you with the old urge to fix, soothe, appease. Learning to feel the difference, in your actual body, in your breath and shoulders, is how you slowly turn the alarm's sensitivity down. And there's a specific place that alarm lives. It lives in the body, not the mind. You can know intellectually that you're safe and still feel your chest tighten when someone goes quiet on you. That's because trauma responses bypass logic entirely. They're stored lower, older, in the parts of you that kept you alive before you had words. This is why simply telling yourself, "Stop being so anxious," never works. You're trying to reason with a system that doesn't speak reason. It speaks sensation. It speaks safety and danger. And until you learn its language, it keeps making your choices for you. So let's talk about that language, because your body has been speaking it this whole time. Notice where the fear actually lives when someone seems disappointed in you. Maybe it's a clench in your jaw, a held breath, a hollow drop in your gut. That sensation is information, not malfunction. This is where inner child healing begins, not in grand realizations, but in the quiet act of noticing what your body does when the old danger flickers. Try placing a hand there, right where it tightens, and simply staying. Most of your life, you fled that feeling instantly. Here's a practice that sounds small but isn't. Tonight, write a few lines to the child you were, the one in the hallway, reading the air. Don't make it poetic. Just tell them one true thing you wish someone had told them back then, that it wasn't their job to manage the grown-ups, that their needs were never too much. This is reparenting, and it feels awkward at first, almost silly. But that child has been waiting an awfully long time to hear from the one person who finally understands what they went through. The reason this matters so much is that no one else can do it now. The adults who should have offered that safety either couldn't or wouldn't, and waiting for them to suddenly provide it keeps you frozen at that closed door. Reparenting is you walking back down the hallway yourself, taking that small hand, and saying the words that were missing. It's offering yourself the emotional safety that was never reliably there. Slowly, your nervous system starts to believe a new message. Someone's here now. Someone stayed. And that someone, improbably, turns out to be you. As that safety grows, something else becomes possible. Something that probably terrifies you a little. Boundaries. For a lifelong pleaser, the word itself can feel almost violent, like you're being cruel just by having a limit. But healthy boundaries aren't walls you build to keep people out. They're the line that finally lets you stay in the room as yourself, instead of as a performance. A boundary is just you saying gently, "This is where I am." And the first time you hold one without immediately apologizing for it, you'll feel something strange flicker. Guilt, yes, but underneath it. Underneath it, freedom. Quiet and unfamiliar, but unmistakable. Because every boundary you hold is a small act of returning to yourself after years of self-abandonment. You start small. You let a text sit for an hour before answering. You say, "Let me think about it," instead of an instant yes. You let someone be mildly disappointed in you, and you survive it. You actually survive it. Each time, you're teaching that old alarm system that a no doesn't end the world. That disapproval isn't death, that you're allowed to exist as a full person. And here's where your whole self-worth starts to quietly reorganize. For your entire life, your value felt conditional. Earned through usefulness, paid for in niceness, renewed daily through approval seeking. But watch what happens as you practice holding yourself instead of performing for others. You begin to notice your worth isn't something you produce. It was never the reward for good behavior. It's just there, the way it's there in every child before the world teaches them to audition for it. You're not building worth. You're uncovering what was buried under all that pleasing. Let's be honest about how this looks from the outside, because it won't always be welcomed. Some people in your life have benefited from your bending. When you stop over-apologizing, stop saying yes too much, stop shrinking yourself to fit their comfort, a few of them will push back. They'll call you difficult, or distant, or changed. And it will hurt, because hurting people has always felt like the one unforgivable sin. But notice something. The people who only valued your compliance were never really seeing you at all. The ones who stay, who adjust, who meet the realer version of you with curiosity instead of complaint, those were always your actual people. You just couldn't tell before, because you'd never given anyone the chance to love the unperformed you. You handed everyone the pleasing version and quietly wondered why connection felt so hollow, so unsafe, so much like never feeling enough. Of course it did. They were loving a role. They couldn't reach you. Because you weren't in the room, you were backstage, frantically managing the show, making sure nobody left. That image is worth holding on to, because it names the strangest cost of all. You spent decades certain that being fully yourself would make people leave. So you never risked it. You gave everyone the easy, agreeable, accommodating version, and stayed lonely inside your own relationships, unseen behind your own kindness. The Fawn response promised safety through invisibility, and it delivered exactly that. You were safe, and you were invisible. But you don't need that particular safety anymore. The danger it was guarding against ended a long, long time ago. So what would it mean to finally put down the act? Not to become rude or cold or selfish. Those were never your risks. You couldn't be careless about others if you tried. The real question is softer and far scarier than that. What would it mean to let yourself be a little inconvenient, a little disagreeable, a little human, and trust that the right people will stay anyway? To stop earning love and start simply receiving it. You've been auditioning your whole life for a part that was already yours. Think about what that means for tomorrow morning, when the old reflexes wake up before you do. Someone will need something. A text will arrive. A face will shift, and your radar will sweep the room out of habit. Only now there's a sliver of space that wasn't there before, a gap between the trigger and the automatic yes. In that gap lies every choice you never knew you had. You won't fill it perfectly. You'll fawn again, apologize again, shrink again on the hard days. But you'll see it now, and seeing it is the whole turn. Because the goal was never to become someone new. You don't need fixing. You were never broken. The goal is quieter and far more radical than that. It's to stop abandoning the person you already are, to bring yourself back into the rooms you've spent a lifetime managing from the wings. The pleasing was never your personality. It was the language you learned to survive a place that asked too much of someone too small. And the most freeing thing about a learned language is that you're allowed to learn another one, starting now. So let me ask you something, now that you've seen it. What would change if you believed, even a little, that you were never the problem in that house? Just a small person doing something brilliant to stay safe. Sit with that, because it rearranges everything you've blamed yourself for. The over-apologizing, the chronic niceness, the exhausting radar always sweeping the room. None of it was a flaw in your character. It was a child's solution to a problem no child should have had to solve. And here's the gentle, difficult invitation. This week, catch yourself in one small moment of self-abandonment. One automatic yes, one swallowed no, one apology that wasn't yours to make. Don't force yourself to act differently. Just notice it and silently say, I see you. You can rest now. That tiny acknowledgement is where everything begins. Not a transformation, a homecoming. I want you to do one thing before you go, because it matters more than you'd think. In the comments, write a single word that describes the child you used to be, the one in the hallway reading the air. Just one word. You'll be surprised how many strangers recognize their own childhood in yours. There's something quietly healing about being seen by people who learned the same language you did. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for staying to the end of this. I know it wasn't always comfortable. I know some of it landed in tender places. The fact that you stayed, that you let yourself look back at that hallway instead of hurrying past it, tells me something about you. A part of you is ready to stop performing and start belonging. That readiness is rarer than you know. So here's the truth I want you to carry out of this. You spent your whole life auditioning for a part that was already yours, chasing an approval that real love never required. The people whose applause you needed most were watching a performance, but you were never an actor. You were just a child who learned that being good was the price of being safe. The audition is over. It was over a long time ago. Nobody was ever really judging you but you. You don't have to apologize for taking up space in this world. You never did. If this gave you even a small new way of seeing your own story, the channel is here whenever you want to keep looking. No rush, no pressure. Just a quiet place that speaks the language you grew up in. And maybe that's the part that lingers tonight, this quiet recognition that you've been performing for people who were never really watching. It's a relief to finally see it. But underneath the relief, if you're honest, there's a harder question waiting. Because seeing the pattern is one thing. Catching yourself in the middle of it, saying yes when every cell of you means no, smoothing the piece at your own expense, and doing it anyway, that's something else entirely. Why do we keep abandoning ourselves even after we know? There's a reason. And it isn't weakness.